Okay. Good evening, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome to another episode of The Package Tourist, hosted by yours truly, the Package Tourist, and the magical mystery tour called Life, Matthew DiBiase. Tonight, I will be interviewing sports author Tommy Phillips on his future release, The Perfect Packers of 1929, Green Bay's first NFL championship team, which is due to be released early next year. Tommy Phillips is a very busy and prolific author who resides in western Pennsylvania. He has published 4 books on NFL football, a book on the Masters tournament in golf, 4 books on college football, 1, a history of the USC Trojans, a history of every single bowl game appearance in Penn State football history, and 2 histories of the Orange and Sugar Bowls. And last month, he released his latest book, The 1980 Moscow Olympics, an in-depth examination of the controversial 1980 Moscow Summer Olympic Games, which were boycotted by the United States. But tonight, we'll be discussing his upcoming release, The Perfect Packers of 1929. Tommy, welcome back to the show. It's great to have you here again.
Thank you.
Yeah, I'd like to ask you, Tommy, what led you to write about the 1929 Green Bay Packers?
Well, for so long, I've only written on more recent events. Like, I started out writing about the 90s in the NFL, and I became a member of the Professional Football Researchers Association, and everyone there was very well versed in the older stuff, and I wasn't as much into that. So I wanted to join their club, so to speak, of these other writers who wrote books on older subjects. So I kind of wanted them to consider me like one of theirs. So I picked a subject that was more akin to what the other authors were writing about. I picked the Packers of 1929 because, well, my favorite team's the Packers, and I knew they had gone undefeated that year, and that was their first championship. So I ventured out to write this book, not exactly even knowing how I was going to do it, but over time I figured things out.
Okay, Tommy, how long did it take you to write this book?
About 6 months. It was a lot faster experience than most things I've written. Usually it takes over a year to write something, but that doesn't mean there's less substance in this book. This book still has a whole lot of numbers in it for its day, that is.
Okay. Now, Tommy, for our audience, please set the stage for our audience about the Packers 1929 season. Based on your research, what were the expectations for the team when the season began?
Well, the Packers had a 6-4-3 record in 1928, but that honestly didn't really mean that much because there was so much roster turnover from year to year. So it really didn't mean much how they did the year before. What was more important was whenever Curly Lambeau brought in some big-name players in the off-season, such as Johnny Blood McNally, Mike Milkowski, and Robert Cal Hubbard.
Okay. What was the significance? Okay, let's talk about those 3 men. What was the What was the significance about Johnny Blood McNally?
Well, with him, he was an excellent halfback / punter / all kinds of different things. He could play anything. He could pass. He could run. He could kick. You know, he did a lot of kicking for the team. He did a whole lot of punting whenever punting was the main offense of your team at the time. You get away a 50-yard punt, and that flips field position. That really helps you. So, but Blood was also a very Paul Bunyan-esque type of person. He had there were so many stories about him, and like some of them we aren't sure if they're true or not. So I made sure that everyone knows just to take the stories with a grain of salt. But he's there were stories of him chasing players and being chased atop the train cars as the train was moving, and of him climbing on Curly Lambaugh's window ledge, asking for his pay early, or whenever it was curfew time, they would, they'd be all locked in their rooms, and he'd use the fire exit to get out of curfew. So I'm not sure how true all those stories are, but he's definitely like a Paul Bunyan of the NFL.
Tommy, in your opinion, could someone make a very entertaining movie about Johnny Blood's exploits both on and off the field? And if so, who would play him in the movie, in your opinion?
Yeah, I'd love to see a well-made movie about him. I'm not sure I trust Hollywood to make a good movie, accurate movie about him. But if they were to make a fictionalized version of his life, it could be very entertaining. But when it comes to an actor, I honestly don't know most actors these days, so I'm afraid I can't come up with an answer to that.
Okay, let's talk about linemen Mike Wachowski and Cal Hubbard.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, Mike Wachowski, he was a guard/defensive lineman who pretty much played every play of every game, and from what his teammates used to say, they said he never got injured. Well, he did get injured on occasion, but most of the time he would play all 60 minutes and not miss a play back whenever the guard was one of the toughest positions to play in all pro football because of all the hits that he'd take there. And he played both sides of the ball, so he's doing that nonstop for 60 minutes. Cal Hubbard, he was a great tackle, and he is the only person who has ever made the Pro Football Hall of Fame and the Baseball Hall of Fame because he became an umpire after his career was over.
So it's accurate to say by getting Wachowski and Cal Hubbard, that really bolstered the offensive line and the defense, especially the defense. Would that be correct?
Yeah. Yep.
Okay. Please tell our listeners about head coach Curly Lambeau. What was his background, and what was it that made him the great coach that he was?
Well, he founded the team back in 1919 alongside George and Whitney Calhoun, who was in charge of the Green Bay Press Gazette at the time, and they founded the team, and Lambeau became the captain, the coach of it. He put the team together, and he was a halfback as well for the team all the way up until this 1929 season. He played in one game in this season because of a mass amount of injuries to other players, so he had to step in and play in one of the games. And but he had full control over the roster decisions, and he was very good in knowing who he needed to fill in certain spots. And so he was kind of like one of the first general managers / coaches, and he knew how to get a roster put together with the right players in place, and that's, I think, what made him a great coach.
Is it true? Tell me if this is true that the Packers, unlike most NFL teams, emphasize the passing game. Is that true?
Yeah, he was a big reason for the. He really helped form the passing game. Sorry, there's an alarm going off in here. So yeah, he really developed the forward pass and made it in vogue in the NFL. Certainly it helped to have good ends with him, but he had some great ends like Labby Dilweg and then later Don Hudson, and they helped make the passing game become more prolific in Green Bay and across the league.
Isn't it true back then throwing a pass was a lot more riskier proposition than it is today? I mean, weren't there certain things that kind of inhibited passing? Can you explain to our listeners just how risky it was back then to throw a pass?
Yeah, there were many more interceptions back then than there are today. And if you threw an incomplete pass in the end zone, then it would be a touchback for the other team. They take over. This is past the time whenever it used to be where, if you threw a pass and it was incomplete and the other team got it, that wasn't the case, except if you threw it into the end zone. But there were a lot of interceptions, so passing was a very dangerous thing in those days.
Also, if I recall correctly, didn't you have to throw a pass to be a legal pass? You had to be 5 yards behind the line of scrimmage to throw a legal pass?
Yeah, that's right.
Yeah.
That's right, yeah. That was a rule that was around in these days, and I don't think it got changed until 33 or 34, somewhere around there.
It was 33, if I recall correctly.
Yeah, 33, yeah.
So you were mentioning like Lavi Delweg. I mean, was he an offensive end?
Yeah, he was one of the great ends of his day, pretty much like the modern day wide receiver, and he really should be in the Pro Football Hall of Fame, in my opinion. A lot of people have suggested that. Now, the problem for him is that the NFL didn't keep official statistics in those days, so there's no way of saying, well, he had so many yards, so many touchdowns. He really was hurt by the fact that there weren't statistics kept in his day, or otherwise I'm sure he'd be in the Hall of Fame.
Would you call him the unsung hero of the Packers in 1929, in your opinion?
Well, I think he was more well-known of a hero. If I were going to pick like an unsung hero, I'd probably pick maybe someone like Coley Lidberg, who was a fullback, and he picked up all the tough yardage. And fullbacks in those days were great if they picked up even 2 yards. And the game was very gritty, so it was important to get those little gains. And he usually had a lot of carries, but not very much yardage. But even so, he was really helpful to the team. He had a immeasurable benefit to the team's offense.
Okay, let's get to the season itself. Did the Packers have any close calls during their undefeated season? Is there any game that comes to mind that might fit the bill, a very close call?
Well, they only trailed one time all season, which was 2-0 to the Chicago Cardinals. They won that game. Their closest game came against the Frankfurt Yellow Jackets, where they finished with a 0-0 tie. And they really should have won that game, though, because the officials kept time on the field, and there wasn't an official clock, and they said they still had a few minutes to go, and all of a sudden they just called the game, and the players thought the game should have kept going, and the Packers were on offense and were driving down the field to score the winning points, and they just called the game. So they only tied that game, which didn't count in the standings, but that was definitely their closest game of the season.
Okay. Who was Green Bay's closest competitor in the 1929 season?
That would be the New York Giants. They finished 13-1-1, and their only loss came to the Packers, 20-6, whenever they played at the Polo Grounds late in the season. And whenever they played each other, everyone pretty much considered that the NFL title game. because it came down to winning percentage, and those teams were way out in front of everyone else. So when the Packers won that game, they were already hailed as world champions, even though they had 2 more games remaining on their schedule.
So this is. Would you explain to our audience the fact that there was no postseason back then? Could you explain that to our audience?
Yeah, at the time, the championship was simply determined by your win-loss record and your winning percentage, and ties did not count in the standings in those days. So when the Packers went 12-0-1, their official winning percentage was 1,000 because the tie did not count in the official standings.
Yeah. Just to clarify further, ladies and gentlemen, that lasted from 1920 to 1932.
Right.
Yeah. Tommy, looking at the Packers' schedule in 1929, what I find amazing is that Green Bay played the last 8 games of the season on the road. Why was that? I mean, when you were doing research, can you offer an explanation? That is very weird, when you think about it.
Why it is weird.
Yeah.
I don't have an explanation for it, but I think it had a lot to do with the fact that they wanted to get all the games at home in at one point, and then pack everything up and just go on a road trip the rest of the season and just keep riding the trains around. And it was just easier for them to do it that way rather than going back and forth from Green Bay to other places, because most of the other teams weren't exactly as close. I mean, yeah, you had Chicago teams, but there were a lot of teams, New York, Philadelphia, that area, where it wasn't very easy to get around back then. So they started off the season with a bunch of games at home and then ended with a ton of games on the road.
Okay. Tommy, is this book conventionally published, or did you self-publish this?
This has been published by McFarland. It's available on their website, McFarlandBooks.com. They have published several of my books now. This one's available for pre-order at McFarlandBooks.com.
When will be the official release date for this book, Tommy?
Oh, honestly, I don't know. I always think it's going to be sooner than it actually is. So I don't know, but I'm guessing sometime early next year.
Okay. Do you think will this book be up on Amazon?
Yes.
Please tell our listeners, where can readers find all of your books?
Well, the fastest way to find all of my books is by my website, TommyAPhillips.com. And certainly you can find it on Amazon, searching in there. You can find my stuff as well as at McFarlandBooks.com.
I'm a little bit curious, Tommy, just to deviate from the subject. You wrote about the 1980 Moscow Olympics. I mean, what led you to write about that? I'm curious.
I got interested in the Cold War era because of the whole Miracle on Ice, and I found that era of sports very fascinating, so I decided that I was going to take a look at what Olympics look like from the other side instead of seeing it from the American side, which is much better known. By doing stuff about Russia, it gave a different perspective on the Olympics.
Who are some key figures in that 1980 Moscow Summer Games? Any key athletes that you discuss in the book?
Man, the problem is I have such a hard time pronouncing their names. But Alexander Gideotin, I honestly cannot pronounce his name, but he once won 6 medals on one day in the Olympics. That's an all-time record. He won 8 medals out of 8 events he entered. He was a gymnast, a male gymnast who won medals on all 6 apparatuses in one day, which I find to be amazing. Certainly you had Nadia Comaneci from Romania, who had done very well in 1976, and she won several medals in Moscow. And there was the Ethiopian track runner, Merut Yipter, who was able to win at, I believe it was the 5,000 and 10,000.
Yes, it was. Yeah. Which is a rare feat. I mean, one of the great line of the great Ethiopian runners. Yeah. Tell me, if I recall correctly, because we were talking about, you would see little snippets of it. The British didn't boycott the games, did they?
No, they sent their team, but they did not compete under their flag. Instead, they used the Olympic flag to be raised at their ceremonies and just to play the Olympic hymn at their ceremonies. Although, from what the stories told, is that in the newspaper they said that the British fans who had been there sung God Save the Queen really loud over the Olympic hymn, so they still had their anthem there anyway. But the British did send a team and won quite a bit too.
Yeah, if I recall correctly, tell me if I'm wrong. Was it Alan Wells won the 100-meter dash?
Yes, that is correct.
I think that's the first Englishman to win the 100 meters since, oh my goodness, what do you think? Like, was it Antwerp? Was it 24, something like that? If memory serves me correct.
Something like that, yeah.
And if I remember this, watching it on TV, the duel between Sebastian Coe and Steve Ovett in the 800 and 1500 meters. I mean, do you get into depth of that?
Oh yeah, book? Yeah. That's one of my biggest stories of the book, is telling the story of those two and their races against each other. I try to give like a play-by-play of those, because you can actually, I think on YouTube you can still see those final races. So I was able to watch them for the first time and see what they were like, and I was able to kind of give a play-by-play of them. So, yeah, definitely that's one of the big stories in the book.
Tell me, is it true those two actually really hate each other's guts?
Well, they didn't like each other, that's for sure.
Yeah.
So, yeah, they didn't get along. I'm not sure what it's like now, but Ovett was kind of a reclusive type of guy who didn't really like media attention, while Sebastian Coe, of course, got into, he became president of the Athletics Federation and has worked with the IOC for some time.
Tell me if this is correct. Didn't the East back then there was the two Germanys, West and East Germany? Didn't Waldemar Cierpinski also emulate Bibi Bikula's feat of being back-to-back marathons?
Yeah, and this is that sounds right. I'm sorry. I'm trying to remember things from this marathon and whether that happened before or after. I was very focused on just this year, so I can't remember what you're talking about here.
Yeah. For those you know, Chapinski won the men's marathon. I remember watching it as a kid. I was 13 years old when he took it in Montreal. It was like he came out of nowhere. Beat Frank Shorter, was it? Yeah, Frank Shorter. He beat him. I mean, in rain too, a nice cold rainstorm, and he won. I mean, he shocked everyone. And then Chapinski did it again. I mean, he became the second man ever to win back-to-back marathons. Bibi Bikila was the first in 60 and 64, and I don't think anyone else has ever equaled that. They're the only two men to do back-to-backs. Correct?
Yeah, that is correct, and I think I spent more time in my book talking about how his name eventually got found with all the other athletes who had been doped up. Now, Now it wasn't like we can't say for sure whether he tried to do the doping or whether it was done to him without him knowing, but his name was found in those records, so it's possible and probable that gave him some sort of boost in 1980.
Yeah. For those of you who don't know, it was after the breakup of communism and all that, it was exposed that there was a lot of massive steroid use amongst Iron Curtain athletes, especially in East Germany, Russia and East Germany. Yeah. So, Tommy, are you contemplating any future book projects?
Yeah. Right now, I'm working on a book about Tiger Woods' career. I'm telling the stories of all 82 PGA Tour events that he won, kind of going shot by shot through. Some of them are shot by shot, not all of them, because obviously most of the shots you can't find anywhere. But yeah, it's a play-by-play of his PGA Tour victories. It's more about the golf than it is about him as a person. So, but that probably won't be out for at least a year or so. But it's getting closer to being completed.
Okay. Well, let us know, Tommy, and I'll have you on the show again, okay?
Awesome.
Tommy, I want to thank you so much for appearing on the show, and you take care and good luck in all your future projects, okay?
Thank you very much.
Okay, take care.
Yep.
Bye-bye.
Bye.
Stay tuned, ladies and gentlemen, for next week's show where I will be interviewing boxing author Mark Cram Jr. Thank you and good night.